That's my cue to tell people assembled here that the meeting is being visually and audio recorded for publication on the Thatcham Town Council YouTube channel. We are immortalised for however long video survives. So welcome everybody. The apologies for absence, please.
Apologies received from councillors Steve Ardell-Walter, Mike Cole, Jeremy Cottam, Lourdes Cottam, and apologies for lateness received from councillor Paul Field.
I think I can also add to that councillor Christine Rice will be here, but late. There seems to be some snarl up of traffic in Newbury this evening.
On the M3.
Councillor Jeffrey.
I believe that I understood that Councillor Lee Dillon couldn't make it as well today.
Correct. Thank you. Let's record that. Thank you for reminding us, Councillor Jeffrey. Right. So, do we have any declarations of interest, please, members? I don't see anybody. Thank you. And public questions.
None received.
Thank you. We have minutes of the 8th and 9th of May. First on the 8th of May, might I propose to accept or proposal, Mr. Mayor? Thank you very much. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor Lissa. Is that the will of the meeting? Please read these minutes, please. Thank you very much indeed. Initially paid, Bill. Madam Clerk, and sign the file. Members. Then we have the next set, which is the 9th of May. Again, I'm pleased to have a proposal. Mr. Mayor, propose. Thank you very much, Councillor Woodhams. Councillor Foster seconding. Thank you very much. Again, please show if you're in favour of these minutes being adopted. Thank you very much. So. Back to you, please. On the page, and we then come to the meeting, and we welcome Mr. Kevin Rose, Director of IAC. Good evening, sir. And we are receiving and adopting the internal auditor's report following our internal audit coming out on the 9th of May. Please introducing this.
Mr. Mayor, if I could hand this one over to our RFO, Steve.
Mr. Pickle, good evening.
Good evening. So we have a series of statutory financial reports to agree and sign off this evening. So sure you're familiar with the annual governance and accountability return that we have a statutory requirement to complete each year. It's split into sections, and the first section that Kevin is here to discuss is the audit section. This is really around providing further assurance on our financial results that we follow governance. Kevin.
Good evening, everyone. I'll just explain very briefly what the internal auditor does and what we don't do. In terms of the internal audit of the Town and Parish Council, it's a statutory requirement. And we have to follow very specific guidance as set out in a document called the Practitioner's Guide. And we have to give responses to specific control objectives on the annual internal audit report. The internal audit does not give an opinion on the accounts. We will do, obviously, a lot of our work is financially related. But we will not sign off on the accounts, and we are not the statutory external auditor. The statutory external auditor is PKF. So subsequent to this meeting, the various bits of paper will go across to PKF, and it is them who will actually, if you like, sign off the accounts. Okay. We work entirely for the council. We're appointed by the council. So, for example, if there are issues for electors, they're not addressed to us. They're then would be addressed to the external auditor. And if an elector raise any queries with us, we would ask them to direct those through the clerk. Okay. In terms of the audit work we did this year, the audit was a good audit. Generally, the responses we've got were almost, with exception, well, we'll touch on exceptions, positive. And then at the year end, we didn't raise any observations. We raised a few observations which related to relatively minor issues at the interim audit. And at the year end, we didn't raise any further observations at all. Unfortunately, at the interim audit, one of the observations we raised was in relation to the exercise of public rights. Now, the exercise of public rights is a period of 30 working days subsequent to the council approving the annual governance statement, accounting statement. And there's very, I would say, almost arcane rules around how that is done. But the primary thing about the period of the exercise of public rights, which is when people want to raise an objection, it's a statutory period of time when people could raise an objection. It has to last 30 working days, and unfortunately, the period of exercise of public rights last year only lasted 28 working days. So this is by far the most common non-compliance that we find in auditing councils. I believe it's 90% due to the complexity of the regulations. But it is what it is. It was 28 days, and it has to be 30 days. So even if it was 25 days or 45 days, it would still be a non-compliance. So that has been raised. We've raised what we call a negative response letter in regard to this, and that will have an impact on the annual governance statement, which the council has to approve, because it's one of the assertions that the council has to make in the annual governance statement. But as I say, other than that, the audit was very good. I would say the council was quite fortunate in having two highly qualified finance staff working for them, and you can see that reflected. Obviously, a lot of councils, there's a lot of variability, but here you have a very competent, highly trained, highly qualified team, and that is very much reflected in what we saw when we were doing the audit.
Okay, I've got a couple of points. I wonder if you might give us a little bit more information on where these very small spreadsheets, we can see on the screen more easily. Yeah, there are responses negative here, not many. Yeah. If you want to talk to any of those, not so positive, we like those, but should we not have a little more information on these negative ones?
Okay. All right. So in terms of what we provide actually two forms like that. It does look rather small. They're on A4. That's the summary version. There we go. So what that will set out on the summary is a number of items that we would have checked. Here, this is more granular, okay, and that will say within that what has given rise to the negative responses. So in terms of well, actually, if you look down the listing here, I know it's quite small, but you can see almost no negative.
Well, I see what I don't know B.
Okay, which is
Which one are you going to? B, that's it. We are.
ah, okay, yeah. Okay. So in terms of detail,
So we've got 31 positive and 1 negative.
yeah. Well, that's right. So that, I think that's probably a typical reflection. If you bear that in mind as a percentage, that's a very, very high level of compliance. But in terms of the negative, I'll just I'll find out, because I need to go drill down into our actual checklist just to see.
Looks like that might be in payment controls.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't want to scratch at the wound here, but I just want to make sure that we are comfortable with the.
Actually, that's very good. I can't actually see what the negative was. I think possibly it was resolved when I did the year end. Okay, so if it was under payment controls, it would have related to. No, I can't see what that is actually.
Okay. If we scroll down.
Yeah.
It all seems to be on the hunt for a file here. Carry on, Noel. Come to Mr. Rhodes.
Yeah, if I, is that the year end when you're looking at on the interim?
And this is the interim here.
Yeah, 'cause I think there must be a difference because on my interim, I don't, on my here, which was issued in Europe, I don't have any negative responses. The same one. We'll just go back. Same day? Yeah, this is the interim. Yeah. Okay. Was that the interim you showed me last time? Because as I say, there's no negatives.
This is interim.
To be honest, I don't know which one that was shown there, because the interim one, there was no negatives.
You did another one on the 8th of May, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And then if we go back to here, so the payment control one, we're not sure of. And then we've got some others here, Mr. Rose.
Yeah.
How do we feel about those? Another page now. Scroll down. Yeah. Stacking up here. Who tells us about those? Okay. It's only that we'll learn from the negatives, I'm sure the club is already doing so. A small number of them is heartening and reassuring.
Okay, so which ones in particular were you interested in?
Go with that other one. Okay, is that the same? You just picked that up, have you? No?
This is, yes, this is the,
So we see one on payment controls, we knew about that.
Yeah.
We see one on other, okay, other's a big bucket, could mean anything. In G, can you see the line other, the row other?
Oh, you're talking about detail. Okay.
I'm seeing. Oh, I've lost payment.
Yeah, under G, I think you might be looking at starting.
Well, what have I got? What have we got here?
Okay, that's
Any ones that are negative.
Right,
I would have
okay.
thought you would have wished to just share a little bit of.
okay. Not every observation that is comes as a negative, we would raise an observation on. Okay. So, for example, if there was 2 or 3 negatives that related to the same issue, we wouldn't raise, say, the same observation 3 times. But in terms of negatives that we gave on, if I just take you through. Okay, fine. So for example, under G, okay, which was a payroll control account, for example, we did raise. I think if you look across, you'll see that there's a recommendation in relation to that observation, that negative. Okay, so the last one, and that related to the an observation that we made at the interim, which is to do with the salary allocation account, which was for September, which hadn't been cleared, that we picked up. So where you see a negative response, If you read across, you would normally see a recommendation in the last column. Okay, and that would have appeared on the observations report that we issued at the time.
Have we got it?
Right?
Have we got it?
Yeah, you'll have
You got the
the.
observation report?
Yeah, I'll have the observation report here. I don't know if that's got a copy.
It went to full council in May, I think.
Yeah.
Published.
In May this year?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, so if you look under G, you can see the observations been raised here. Payroll control account agrees to value, there's the observation, and then there's the recommendation. I don't know if you can just scroll up. The only one we were talking to.
Now we're seeing the link to the issue.
Yeah.
Not a big issue, but.
Yeah, so what we do, this is the main document that we would use, which is the internal audit observation, because it's a narrative.
Yes.
So, and that's designed, if you can see the last column, for the clerk or the auditor to make comments and to bring that to council's attention.
Yep.
The reason that we give the other report, which is a summary report, and the detailed report, is because this is only reports on exceptions. Okay, so it doesn't tell you what else we tested and what we found compliant and what was non-compliant. So the summary report, I think if you look at the summary report for this year, there was something like 130 odd. I can tell you actually. Yeah, so we gave 139 positive responses and 6 negative responses. And actually, although we had 6 negative responses, we made 7 recommendations, so they don't necessarily correlate. So as a percentage, you can see that's quite a
Absolutely,
very
I
small
like the
percentage.
ratio.
Yeah.
But I think it would help me, and I'm not sure about other members, if that summary report with the narrative, with the text, had been in our paperwork tonight, we could have referred to it.
Okay.
That's okay, that's just something for us to learn and take on board, and in next year do exactly that.
What I would normally suggest is the summary report, we normally, actually in the cover letter, I think it says you share these with the council. The detailed report, we provide additionally if there are further questions, i.e. what is the issue with payroll? And then you can see it more granularly. But we don't produce, obviously we're doing 140 tests, so we gave a report that gave the outcome of every test.
I agree, but the exception would have been valuable and helpful tonight. Yeah. That part, lovely. Is that with you members? I think that might have been.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One other point, and then I'll leave it for members. The dates, if you look at the back page of my paper, the dates until we undertaken 1805, 21, 03, 02, 22. The 8th of May, 9th of May, on it, because on my agenda it says following an internal report carried out on the 9th of May 2022.
Okay. The box on the net. To be candid, there's no guidance as to what dates appear on this report. Okay. Practitioners' guide don't do it, but the internal auditors forum, which is the group, if you like, of sector auditors. Their practice is the dates on the left are the dates within the financial year, which is, so that will be within the financial year 2021-2022, in which audit work was undertaken. The idea of that is so that council could give an assurance on the annual governance statement for 21-22 that audit work was undertaken. The date on the right is the date of this year's report. So this date of this year's report will be one of the dates that appears on next year's report on the left-hand side. Okay.
I wish I could say okay, but I'm looking at an agenda item that says following an internal audit report, an internal audit carried out on the 9th of May 2022.
The 9th of May was the date I visited the council, but it's not the date of the signature of the report. The date of the signature of the report is the date the report was issued.
So you visited the council to discuss the report?
No, to undertake the audit work. So what happens is you'll appreciate when you do an audit, it's not done in 1 hour in the morning. Okay, so what happens is we'll attend, which will be based on council's availability, and subsequent to that, we may have further emails. We may issue a draft report. So that we will issue a report, and that date of that report is the date that we will record as our audit date.
And therefore I won't prolong this.
Yeah.
If it says, and I think you've just agreed that you did some work on the 8th of May 2022.
Yeah.
Should I not see that date on your document?
No, because we never issue any documentation in relation to that audit, so we wouldn't.
Okay.
We did that work was related to the report that you now have, which will have a date on the date. Because obviously, when we go to take an audit, we might work over 3 or 4 different days.
Other than the February. If you were still doing work on the 9th of May.
But we will always, because we always issue our internal report after the 31st of March, because that's when it has to be done.
Okay. Are there any questions from them? Then we are being asked, I think, are we being asked to,
So yes,
we've adopted this anyway, no, to receive and adopt this report. Councillor.
thank you. I just clarify through you to the clerk. My understanding is that the document we're referring to was received and noted at our previous full council meeting. So from the perspective of the council, it's been concluded.
Well, you did say it was noted.
Yes.
That's different to resolving.
No, but the document.
Adopting, yeah.
No, but the document we're referring to, which was the report, which was seen at the last meeting of full council. Yeah, could you clarify? Yeah.
It's the report that was adopted at the last meeting
Yes.
was the interim.
Yes.
This
Okay.
is now the year end.
Okay.
So matters that were recorded in the interim have since been addressed, hence why they're no longer on the
Okay.
year end report.
Thank you.
Then we look like we've made headway. Is anybody wishing to propose that we adopt? Received, and now are we proposing to adopt?
Proposed.
Thank you very much. Might that be a second?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Lister. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Rose, thank you. I think our latecomers could now join the table. If they wish to. Make some space. It'd be nice to have them closer to hand. Okay, so that item is concluded, and we welcome Councillor Field and Councillor Rice. We're now moving on to Mr. Badging to introduce the accounts for 21 money.
So the annual accounts is about from our financial system, things like balance sheet, income and expenditure account. Just to provide a little bit more detail on. So the first document is the balance sheet. You can see there, and I know we discussed this previously, is that our current legal requirements is that we're not required to hold fixed assets on the system. They're held on a separate schedule, and we'll come on to discuss that. So looking at our assets, you can see there that overall the assets have reduced, and that's really a reflection that obviously we've spent quite a lot from reserves this year. So we've taken money out of the public sector fund, etc., to fund the year. In that West current account, the balance is lower than it was in the previous year, etc. So that's the total assets. So in terms of liabilities, again, you can see the creditors there are higher. That's really a reflection. Towards the end of the year, we generated more expenditure around work on the Broadway and also work at the Central Garden on the so we were incurring higher costs towards the end of the year. So So what does that mean overall? That means that, as you can see there, that our assets, less liabilities, have fallen by around 160,000. Again, that's a reflection that we spent somewhere in the region of 155,000 for reserves last year, which obviously the reserves are held on our balance sheet. So that's the explanation. And then below that, you can see the represented party. It's just that, again, when we look at the reserves each year, in the F&G committee meetings, obviously we discuss the reserve position decisions that are made by council, that obviously. And again, you can see the reserve position there. And again, as a result, as I mentioned, spend. So, any questions on the balance sheet?
Councillor Richard Cromwell.
Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Mayor. I'm afraid not an accountant. Me found this difficult to follow. It's headed balance sheet 31st of March 22. Then there's two columns left and right. One headed 31st of March, no year. Another one headed 31st of March, opposite no year. Now, I presume I was looking through this that one is last year and one is this year, but it doesn't seem to say so anywhere. Shouldn't accounts like this be absolutely precise?
Again, I think the advantage of running reports from our financial system is that we're getting one version of the truth. It isn't something on a spreadsheet that I've been playing around with. The limitation of taking reports from the system is obviously we're restricted to the way they were designed. So obviously that is a poor design that it hasn't got the year in, it's only got the dates. Absolutely, I agree with that. We can take that back to reality and ask if they can modify the report, but that isn't something that can change. As I say, my own preference is that we look at information straight out of our financial system rather than.
So the left-hand one is what, last year?
Yes, sorry.
So that's 21, 22. Couldn't it be added in, manually before it's photocopied and sent out?
Sorry, catch that.
It could have been on the page.
Yeah, I'll take that forward. Thank you.
And for me, Mr. Tibble, the asset list by group name, that's very comprehensive, has buildings. None of that shown on the balance sheet. Is that peculiar to local government?
Again, I think we touched on this last year. It's government with trying to simplify and streamline bureaucracy around local governments. So they took a lot of the kind of statistical analysis, CIFR analysis that councils were doing. They also looked to simplify the accounts on the basis of saving money. So the reason for the annual governance return is to produce a set of financial information that represents, that's proportionate to the size of the council. Is the thinking behind it. So again, we are guided by statutory requirements. This isn't a decision that I've made personally. It's the statutory requirements.
No, but I might be getting this wrong. I'm being quite crude about this. But if I see assets, this asset list by group name, 4.363 million current value. Would I add that to the 556,000 to get a true asset value position?
Well, when we come on to looking at the annual governance return, we'll see that there is a box in the return, and that's the total. That's that 4.3 million.
4.3 million. This includes the 556,000, does it?
So in section 2 of the, I think it would help me if we could just go through the documents sequentially. That's okay.
This one or this one?
So, well, I'm not even on to the asset list yet. I'm on the balance sheet at the moment.
I know you are.
Yeah.
I know you are. And I was just looking to see what the total asset value was of that council, because I think in the public domain of interest.
And we're coming on to that as the next item on this report.
I'll wait.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so if we move on to the asset list by group name, again, the regulations around the asset list, again, it's not something that I'm deciding, it's something that the government has decided, and we're no longer required to revalue assets. So what you'll see there is a breakdown of original cost, but the column that's probably more of interest in terms of what are the assets worth are the insurance values. So the third column, and we undertook as part of the review of our insurance this year, we brought in a building surveyor who revalued all our properties, and our overall property values increased by over 2 million, maybe 3 million, I believe. So the insurance values are effectively the retail valuations that we've had independently assessed. The middle column current value is the value that we report. So the bottom from that, according to our surveyor, that is and I think what's particularly interesting there is the priory, which is increased up to 2.7 million value. So
Councillor Jeffrey may be quite interested in that figure, since he was the driving force behind buying it. Considerably less amount of money. Yes. You remember what the price was?
Was it 400 and something?
481,000.
Oh, well done, Councillor.
481,000.
He said he wasn't an accountant, but by God, he's lightning fast with that, isn't he? So £481,000 of purchase price became £2.7 million of asset value. Not a bad investment, Councillor Jeffrey.
Not too bad.
My kids buy their own house.
Something I'm glad I voted.
Back to you.
So in terms of the asset ledger, as I say, we're not required to, again, I would imagine the thinking behind it was there was a cost involved in every 5 years going out and revaluing all your assets, employing expensive resource to do it. So what we are left with is the asset register that we had historically, the historic values. Insurance values are there for information, and also obviously to provide assurance that we have insured in the event of them being fire damage, etc. So the other thing around the assets is we don't put things on the asset register under £1,000. So for instance, if you looked at the Broadway, there are lots of bins and things that we put in, but we're not putting all that on there because it doesn't. We're not writing them down. So, but what we have added this year into the asset is obviously the conference solution that we have in the council chamber now, which is just over £5,000. We have a new reception audio system, which is 1,000. And the larger bins that were on the Broadway, the double bins, they were actually cost more than £1,000 each. So we can put those on. So in terms of disposals, there was a warden mast, I think, that was outside that we've since taken down. So that's the explanation of the asset values. As I mentioned, when we look at the annual governance return, I will come back to that totally because we do provide that information at summarised level. So, are there any questions on the asset list?
Yes, I have, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed that the solar panels are not insured. Is that because there is no insurance company that do that, or
They're covered within the building itself.
they will come within the building?
We did query. It's a good point. We did query that as part of
Thank
the renewal of insurance, and they assured us that the solar panels are included within the building.
You then, sir.
So we move on to the expenditure. So again, absolutely looking at the budget for the year. This is just a high-level summary of the moment. So if we look at income there, we can see that as a total, we can see that, so we can just scroll down just a little bit. You can see that our income year on year, and again, apologies to Council Cromwell, we don't have the year in year, but it is a year on year analysis that we have. So we can see that the income has gone from 900,000 just over £1 million. And some of the reasons for that movement, obviously we have a welcome back fund, which we received a grant for 43,000 for this year. We also received a green grant for 7,881 that we carried over from the previous year that was used for the visions of recovery there. So the other major movement is the recovery of the facilities income. So, for instance, if we look at Frank Hutchins Community Hall, you'll see that during COVID, the income was 11,000. Obviously, this is recovering income is 36,000. So the income that was affected by COVID is obviously starting to recover, which is very positive. So
forgive me, you probably don't have this figure, but 2019 pre-COVID would be the benchmark, wouldn't it?
yes, yeah.
Because we don't know if 36,000 is close to trend or still some way adrift.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if we look at the budget for this year, it was still adrift, and we reduced the budget, some of the budgets down. We had quite a long process of bringing the budgets this year, and we did bring the budgets down, and we had a meeting with Councillor Cole this morning, discussing how our income is performing against those budgets this year. So yes, absolutely, it's something that we have to look at.
Yeah, I think there's still more work to be done in terms of getting them back to where they were before COVID, isn't there?
Yes. Okay, so that's looking at the income. So the running costs, again, we're really looking at obviously things like the welcome back fund spending. And then we look at the total. Obviously, our income's gone up, but so is our expenditure. We just have a quick look at the totals now. And again, you can see 960,000 spent. Well, for disclosure purposes, we have to show everything that we spend. So we're not just talking what we have in our revenue budget this year. If we spend through grants, if we spend through reserve spend, everything has to be included in this return. So you can see that we have spent more, over 200,000. 155,000 of that was from reserve spending, and the EOR schedules that we regularly issue have a breakdown of that spend. But in addition, as we know, towards the end of the year, we receive grants for the welcome back for Broadway redevelopment, and we also receive some grant funding for the work on the Century Garden and the footpaths on Turnfield. So we can see that where effectively we've spent. So then if we go down to look at the general fund analysis, you can see there that the figures so we look at the total. So what we're looking for on that closing balance is 220,000. So 220,000 is our minimum general reserve. So and that balance will only be affected if we have a over or underspend in the financial year. So if it was a private sector company, it would be the retained earnings posting of a profit or a loss. For ourselves, it's the an overspend or an underspend, and I'm sure you recall that the previous 2 years we hadn't provided a balanced budget, so we had a small overspend the previous 2 years, and you can see that in the previous year we had an overspend of just under 4,000 and this year we had an overspend of around 9,000. So what I did at the beginning of the financial year, I topped that back up from the general fund working balance, bring that up to 220,000. So transfers to and from reserves. So then you can see again the figure from last year is a little bit distorted because we had much higher still receipts last year than we have this year. And I moved some of the general fund into the general fund working balance, which effectively reclassified it. We discussed that last year, but it's so effectively, we did actually obviously spend from reserves, but this year you can see the 155,000 on the right column, which is obviously the accelerated spend that we had this year from reserves. So are there any questions on expenditure strategy?
Richard Cromwell.
Thank you, Chairman. Under the second, halfway down the page, running costs, staff is shown as both a 0 for 21 and 22. I can't see the expenditure anywhere else. Can you explain?
In central services.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I'm just looking for the. Yeah, sorry, apologies. Yes, it is in central services. So we to have a reflection of what each service costs us each year, we allocated a proportion of staff costs. And again, I agree that the report is misleading the way it's presented. Again, it's coming straight from the financial system. It's something we can look at, but it's the, as Councillor Brooks mentioned there, it's the central services cost, the 236 and the 250. So effectively, the staff costs went up around 14,000 this year.
So I think I'm right in saying that we allocate the staff costs to individual cost lines.
Yes.
Yeah. Some on events. Do we allocate some on the Frank Hutchings Urban Community Centre?
We do, and the idea behind it is to really say what is the service actually costing us. So in a lot of areas, the service is costing, say, allotments. The income that we receive for allotments is far less than what we spend. So it's a true reflection of what we spend, and as an organisation, we can then determine whether we're happy the way that our resources are allocated. So
you want to come in, Mr. Rice?
Yeah. That when we were talking about the internal audit observation that I made related to staffing, that was when I came. I picked up the journal or allocation journal for September. I hadn't been put through it. That's what the observation related to.
And so this is suggesting then that the Frank Hutchings Community Hall is costing over £4,000 a month, with income of 36,000. So we need to get it up 51,000 if that's for it to wash its face. Is that staff allocation, cleaning and power managing and
all those costs are charged direct. So we receive those facilities. So the staff is purely the permanent staff, if you like, the allocation. So it's but it's always a judgment as to how resources are allocated across the different service areas. So, but what it does give you is where the subsidy is higher.
and we don't ask them to do timesheets, so it's an estimate.
It's an annual estimate.
Yeah, and we re-estimate each year.
We do.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions, members, on this particular part? Okay.
So again, so it's just about some further information, which is, as I mentioned, it's just showing the opening balance is the balance at the beginning of the financial year, and the closing balance is the balance at the 31st of March. And the net transfer is obviously where that 150,000 has been allocated in terms of the various earmarked reserves that we had in place. So again, it's just
Thank you. With that conclude the financial statement of your desk, Mr. Tickles. And we are asked to approve them. Okay, I'm looking for somebody to propose approval. Councillor Zister.
Second.
Williams to second. All those in favour of approving these accounts, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Tickle, that's very comprehensive. Now I want to governance, which is one you want to come back to.
yes. So as I mentioned, this form 3 is the one that we've got the internal audit report, scroll down through that. So this section, there are various levels of control that we have. Obviously, internally, we're governed by the financial procedures and standing orders that we have in place, and we review those each year. And the standards that are provided. Now, as part of the governance environment, if you like, so we haven't mentioned the internal audit, we have the external audit, but we also do our own internal governance review. And that's really just looking that are we also meeting the governance requirements that we set for ourselves, and as a council. There's a section here that we run through the statements, and then the chairman will sign agreement or not at the end of it. So this section 1. So I don't know if it's possible now to jump to this other. It's not in there. Sorry, it's the next attachment on the this. Sorry. So this section 1 has 9 statements, and what I've done, I've put a supplementary document in the pack. That really picks up the control objectives, and then there's all the guidance also gives us information in terms of the things that we should be doing to maintain good governance regime, if you like. So what we have to do is then look at that regime and just evidence that from the various council meetings we've had during the year that yes, we are fulfilling the requirements. So in effectively that first one, we put in place arrangements for effective financial management during the year and for the preparation of accounts. So effectively, what we're looking for: have we agreed the budget well ahead of the financial year? Have we set precept? And have we managed the budget effectively through the year? So that's really what we're looking for. So all this statement really says is just mentioning that when the various documents went to the various council meetings and were reviewed and decisions made. So if you like, that's our own internal evidence that we are managing money effectively. And again, we run through various things here. So the accounting records, obviously we have qualified staff in place, bank reconciliations, again, public money. We carry out regular bank reconciliation. Those reconciliations are also approved and signed by FGP. Investments, yes, we have an investing subcommittee. We have investment policies in terms of, obviously AAA investments, etc. So effectively, all this this statement is, and I don't know how much of this you want me to run through, but it's effectively evidencing that we've met the requirements for these controls.
Well, let's see what members might wish to amplify. I think the presentation has been very helpful indeed, and this is a standard annual type pro forma that we go through. Yeah. Yes. Do I have any questions, Councillor Richard Crump?
Can I just sort of roll one along? So this is, you're doing an internal audit and you tick the boxes to say this has been complied with and that has been complied with, and there's one where the time for public participation hasn't been met, which we'll come on to. There's a bit of self-regulation. We have mentioning external auditors come in. Do they reproduce all this? Do they check you out? Make sure that your audit is proper?
I think again, it's all down to cost. The way the control regime works now, we place assurance, and external auditors have done this for many years. They'll place assurance on the work of others. So the work that Kevin does, and the information that Kevin provides as an internal auditor is supplied to the external auditor, and they do what's the exact term? It's not a full review. They do a partial review. So
a cherry pick.
Effectively, but again, it's to do with the charges. They charge £1,600 a year for an external audit. And I think those of you probably who've been in larger councils or larger organisations, £1,600 is not a lot of money for external auditors. So Yeah, sorry, they also don't come here, so we produce the returns and we send them off along with the, there are some supplementary schedules I'll run through on here, but they request some supplementary information which we provide, and there's a percentage within the return. So if the margin of difference on some of the figures is greater than a certain percentage, you're asked to complete a further schedule. So we can have a look at those where we have exceeded those tolerances, if you like. And then they will carry out a review, and then in September we receive the final section of this return when they complete their partial assurance. So to answer the question, it's the kind of we're placing reliance on each other. The reliance that we've got a good control arrangements ourselves, following best practice. We have internal audit to do a review of our controls twice a year, and then we have the external audit to finish this off. So does that answer the question? Yeah. Okay.
I think that's a modicum of yes. Councillor.
Thank you. This is a clarification from my understanding that it sounds like the internal audit is more to do with process and compliance, and the external audit is to do with numbers, effectively. So they're checking the accounts, whereas you're checking the process that leads up to that.
That's right. That's right. The external also additional powers. So if electors want to object to the accounts, and they have investigative powers.
I think it may be at the point where the council is minded to approve these, unless you want to do anything else, Mr. Tickle.
Yeah.
Under government statement, section 1, that would be the landscape one. Mr. Tickle?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Apologies, sir. So it's really to do with this section. We can go back to this section 1. Sorry, Mel.
So that's in this document.
Yeah. So effectively, these boxes that we're ticking here to say that we agree. So those numbers on the left. So that supplementary schedule is just provided.
This is the section. Agreeing this, members, section 1 on your portrait report, and also Mr. Tickle, section 2.
Yeah, we'll come on to, yes, we'll come on to section 2. Yes.
Let's get section 1 out of the way. I think
So
I'll be deciding this.
So there's no impact on this. Thanks. Which one? Number 4. Yeah. That's a tick. So do I tick or cross it? Doesn't matter. So yeah, so on this list, it was the point 4 is the point to do with the exercise of public rights. So because I rather foolishly counted 28 days rather than 30, we fail on that one. I think I mentioned when we discussed it in May that it's not an excuse. It is a poor error, but in the previous year it was 30 days. No, we didn't have any inquiries, and this year it was 28 days. Should have been 30 days, and we had no inquiries. But that still doesn't excuse the fact that it was that I can't add up.
Is this the document, page 4 of 6, that you're looking for us to sign on?
Absolutely. So if I tick this now to say that apart from box 4, should we do it?
Yes. Apart from box 4.
Absolutely. And then the chairman signs.
And you're going to tick no on box 4, are you?
Yes. So effectively, that's the. It's what I would like to do something. Yeah, so that has to be very great. So thank you.
Okay. So members, you have your paperwork, you have the portrait. I'm looking at a document where everything is ticked yes, except number 4, as explained by Mr. Tickle, which is ticked no. That is what you're being asked to agree. Do I get a proposal so to do?
Propose, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do I get a very good double act going on there. Thank you very much.
Working very closely, Mr. Mayor.
And would you wish me to sign it now?
And we have a vote.
I'm going to vote on it, but
Dispensing with the motion.
Well done, councillor Rice, absolutely. To be chastised. Thank you very much. Sign that there and you'll date it. One is done. And we now come to section 2.
Yes, sorry. So now we move on to section 2, which, as I mentioned, was the is the summary of financial information. So the section 2 of the accounting. That's the one, yeah. So again, this is the high level information that are external. The balance brought forward effectively March 22 is the closing balance. So scroll down. So that row 7 balance is carried forward. That's 7 balance. 248 becomes the opening balance for the year, the reserve. So and then we have, you can see there that we have the preset figure for
the 556 we saw earlier, didn't we? Balances going forward.
Yeah. And then we've got the other receipts, the income, staff costs there, loan and interest. So on the PWLD loans in row 5, see the interest and capital repayments, all loan payments, etc., etc. So and then row 9 is that fixed asset figure that I referred to earlier.
You did,
yeah,
you did. And is row 8 the total of the numbers above?
That's the total of cash and short-term investments, and we do have a schedule that I've provided. So if we go into bank reconciliation pro forma, which is just below. So there, so look at that. So this is the breakdown of the cash and short-term investments that we're currently holding.
Excellent. When I said earlier, we had the 4.363 million of fixed assets and long-term investments. Were we able to add the 556 to that to get to around about 5 million of assets, 4.9 million of assets? Would that be an appropriate thing to do?
Yes.
Just to give us the quantum about our asset value. Really.
Or as I say, if you take the insurance values, which are probably...
Oh, my word, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So that's, and you can see on the, sorry, scroll back a bit. So number 10, total borrowing. So you can see the PWLB loans there are slowing down now. Yeah. So again, that's a summary of the financial information. What I will come on, it's probably worth before we sign this, if we just have a quick look at the explanation of the variances pro forma for those who are on. So when I mentioned this is what the external auditors, they obviously we've got the year-on-year balances there, and then it throws out whether explanations are required. So explanations are required around other payments, primarily, as I say, because we've spent quite a lot from reserves and also the welcome back fund and the grant for the resurfacing of the Thatcham Town Council. So the analysis I provided to the auditors was just a breakdown of that difference. So that's the only other piece of information on here. So I'll just scroll down. A reconciliation between box 7 and 8, which is just looking at the so that's the totality of the information that the external auditors require from us. And so if we scroll back up, to this, yeah, here, so again, we're happy with the statements, again, we need a signature from the chair to approve that.
So before I sign this and ask for members to propose a second and even vote, would it be fair to say that even without the new valuation for insurance purposes, the finances and the assets of the council are in good shape?
Yes, yeah, I would say so.
I think it's an important aspect to remember that having come through a pandemic when we were under severe pressure, our general asset position is strong, notwithstanding also that the revaluation has made it even stronger. So that's heartening, and well done, and thank you for your work on this and the staff's work. So again, have I got the double act? Suppose Mr. Councillor Lister. All those in favour? Thank you very much. And I will sign. Okay, you have one little swan song here, I don't. This one I've got for you.
Yes, so that's the one that
I all remember that.
yes. So I made it 32 days this year, so
Right.
just in case there's
Okay, and we confirm the period of the for exercise of public right will be the 29th of June 2022 to the 11th of August 2022. That is this document here. I don't think I need to sign it. I'm going to ask the council. Mr. Councillor Lister.
Okay, I'm not proposing this. Sorry. I just want to be clear, I know you said 32 days. I think, Kevin, when you talked earlier, you said 20 or 45. Were you?
No. I think the point he was making is he made it 28 days last year and he's making it 30. An average 30 over 2 years, it was a joke.
But it's 32 days.
It's over, as long, I think as long as you're over 30.
No.
It has to be exactly.
I was going to ask, at the moment it's 32 days. I don't know if that's because these are dates which are inclusive.
30 working days.
Okay, so in that case, I think
I've got a really reckon.
I need to adjust.
you need to just
Thank you. I thought I've done these for years. This is the first time I've ever got one that I didn't cover the 30 days for, but it's ironic, it's my final one, but.
Well, councillors can have their uses. Thank you for that, Councillor Lister. So we're just confirming that, and again, I'm going to ask the councillor so to do. I'm looking at the double act over there again. Councillor Lister, jumping up this time.
sorry, Mr. Mayor, what are we proposing?
Then Tuesday, the 9th of
I
August.
think we need to make an edit.
We need to edit. So we're going to amend it. Okay, we're going to amend it to the
Tuesday, 9th of August.
Thank you very much. So would your proposal be with the amendment, please?
Yes, entirely.
Thank you. Now you have
With the amendment, thank you.
And I think we got there, all those in favour, before I forget. Thank you very much. And we're through the accounts. I'm grateful to you both. Thank you. Highly set of accounts. Growth in our assets is always nice. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you're also welcome to go. But thank you for making a dry subject engaging and dull.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. So members, close item 6, closure of Lloyds Bank Thatcham branch. Received the notification is scheduled to close on 25th of August, which is this one on your paperwork. Mr. Mayor, do I have to declare an interest as I have a bank account with Lloyds Bank? I doubt it, but I look to the clerk. I think it's at your discretion if you wish to. And it's all private business as well.
I've taken advice and the answer may be no.
I'm not sure Councillor Pike's absolutely the one to necessarily give you advice. Councillor Jeffrey?
Mr. Mayor, I hadn't actually thought of this, but having just heard the comments, I frankly think I would suggest that anybody who has a Lloyds bank account, and specifically a Lloyds bank account at Thatcham, I think I would suggest that they should declare it, and I will start the ball rolling by saying I have my accounts.
Thank you.
at
Councillor Woodham?
I am declaring an interest.
Councillor
I have a councillor.
Crumley?
Me as well.
Councillor Lillycroft? And you're all going to be disadvantaged, aren't you, when they move?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, we are. Thank you. So, who would like to lead on this? We are really just receiving and noting
Yes.
closure, but Councillor Jeffrey, you seem to have been in communication with.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, yes, when this first came out, I responded by saying that normally when a business is closing in Thatcham, I will put some comments in, if only as the chairman of the town centre committee, and where appropriate, I would say how disappointed and what's the logic. But I added to my email to them, so it had a very personal interest because I was indeed. I opened my account when we married and moved to Thatcham in August 1979, and quite frankly, very, very disappointed to see a proposal that should close. I had a rather strange Zoom conversation with one of their members for public consultation, marketing people, and the manager of the Basingstoke Newbury and Thatcham branch. So it was a strange conversation because they could hear what I was saying, I couldn't hear anything they were saying. And so we then followed that up with an exchange of emails. I have not had any reply whatsoever to the email that I sent. No point that I raised with them has been responded to in writing, and frankly hasn't been responded to in any other way. I am very disappointed. When I realised this was going on our agenda, I had pretty well assumed that they would come and attend, at least by Zoom, as tonight. And I'm again very disappointed that there doesn't seem to be any response of any description. So I think the comments that I'd like to make are, there isn't anybody in this chamber, there isn't anybody in Thatcham that has the slightest doubt, but this is a done deal. We will be losing that branch at the end of August. It's as simple as that. There's no conceivable way they're going to bother to change their mind on that now they publicly announced. But I do think that this council would be doing a proper duty by the people of Thatcham to ask that they give us full and detailed responses, at least to the points that I made, and perhaps any other points that people around the council chamber tonight will wish to add, and to see whether some other kinds of arrangements can be made. I think the one point that I want to zero in on is not it will be personally inconvenient to me that I can't just walk down the road from Park Lane in 5 minutes to the bank and pay a check-in once a month, which is what I'm typically doing. I think the really big point is that with the closure of the branch to Kingston Centre, we will lose all but one of our central Thatcham cash points. So there'll only be one cash machine left in the centre of Thatcham. That's the one which is on the pavement outside the co-op. And the point that I made to Lloyds, to which I've not had a response, and the point that I make to fellow members of council is that at the moment, if you go into the branch while it is open, you're able to withdraw a sum of money without anybody being around you, without you being out in the open. And if for some reason it were to be a fairly large sum of money, you were drawing £500 because you were going to pay a trader, or it was the money you were taking on holiday with you or whatever, that to do it just standing outside the co-op down there at the southern end of the Broadway, perhaps at night, is a very different thing from being able to go in during the open hours into an enclosed space within the branch, within the public area of the Lloyds Bank branch, and to draw a fact, I suppose you're drawing 20 quid out. I don't suppose you want to be knocked on the head even with the 20 quid, but that's in a different order of magnitude than if you were taking 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 pounds out in cash. And I thought that was one point that I couldn't see that Lloyds could get around. Well, they got around it by not responding anyway to any point that I made at all. And I am very, very disappointed. And I would like this council to express that disappointment, assuming councillors feel in a similar. Those, I think.
Okay. That's a good introduction. Thank you, Councillor Crumley. And I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, thank you, Councillor Jeffrey, for chasing them up. Just for information, which I'm sure everybody does know, most of the transactions that you do in the bank, you can do in the post office. It's worth just having a look to see where you can pay in, you can take out, etc. And let's just hope the post office doesn't close.
Thank you. Councillor
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would support what Councillor Jeffrey said. It is disappointing that the management of Lloyds haven't been in touch with the council to keep us informed with what's going on, but more widely than that, to make some suggestions as to what customers can do to make sure that their lives aren't too badly disrupting, but this doesn't apply to everybody. You know, that there are many people in Thatcham who will struggle with any kind of online banking. Yes, it's a very good point. The post office does cover most of those services, but every time a bank leaves town, the service leaves the town, it makes things more inconvenient for a significant part of our local population. Having said that, I suppose we should give Lloyds some credit for being the last bank to desert the town. I've been with them many years as well. And it is something of a vicious circle, I guess, we're dealing with today, in that online digital services are more and more popular, and they, of course, drag people away from the physical branches, which gradually makes it uneconomical for them to continue to function. But I think we could have expected a little bit more in terms of communication and general reassurance from the bank. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo the comments made so far. I arrived in Thatcham in 1979. I think we went initially to the TSB in Newbury, but followed into Thatcham. But can I also say a word about the staff? Absolutely fantastic staff. You get to know them almost as friends, if you like, sadly behind glass. Always incredibly helpful. And I think you can't replace that, really. I'm sure the staff in other post offices and other places are equally as good, but when you've been used to seeing the same person for so many years, and you have that confidence that they can look after you, that means an awful lot. And I think our thanks ought to go for the staff and the way they've looked after their customers. I know some perhaps will be made redundant, some relocate to other branches. So we will miss them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So, Councillor Jeffrey, I'll come back to you. You talked earlier about saying you would wish this council to express its disappointment in this turn of events. How would you wish it to express that?
Mr. Mayor, I would quite literally like to suggest that the council sends a communication to Lloyds expressing its disappointment that the points that I raised, and I raised them not as a customer, I raised them as the chairman of the town centre committee, that no response whatsoever has been received to them, and disappointment that they've not. We did issue and the fact that they have not seen fit to attend this meeting either in person or by Zoom. So I'm sure the clerk will not back into like to say.
You're proposing this letter to be sent to Lloyds Bank.
Yes.
Okay. Based on your email reaching out to them, which the clerk can already purpose.
Yes. But that's been,
Now, would that find a seconder that we write expressing our disappointment? You could also ask, would Lloyds look at providing an ATM within the town? You can always ask in isolation of a branch.
yes.
I don't know the logistics around that. I think also I would recommend, and I'm told that there are websites that you can go on to and find the name of the managing directors of Lloyds or customer services director. And I think if we go up the pecking order as high as we reasonably could, rather than the public affairs manager, shall we not try and do so?
Mr. Mayor, I would agree.
Okay, so you're proposing that. Do I have a seconder? I've got a seconder in Councillor Lillycroft. All those in favour of that course of action? Thank you very much. I think we're okay to take that draft.
In cahoots.
In communication and consultation with Councillor. Thank you. I'm on to 7, Lawrence's Lane. We are receiving notification of appeal made to the Secretary of State's decision West Branch Council refused planning permission for the above application. Council advised the opportunity to apply for the status. I understand, Councillor Pike, as PLH Chairman, you'll introduce this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I've got two options, Chairman, either the brief summary or the full explanation. I shall adopt. Let's start with the first one. I hope that's sufficient.
Thank you very much.
So we've been notified that the dates of the public inquiry for it's planning inquiry of the appeal against the refusal of planning permission for the Gypsy and Traveller sites at Lawrence's Lane, which is scheduled for 8 working days in September. And we've been asked if we wish to apply for what's called Rule 6 status. And this would give the council a formal status within the inquiry, which would enable us to address it directly, to make presentations in principle, to call witnesses, to make an opening and closing statement. You will have received from the clerk, unfortunately, because of the timing when received the information, you received it separately a day after the agenda, a draft submission. So one of the documents that we would need to make is what's called a statement of case, which is our views on this matter. And I've prepared this, which is taking the comments that we made when we originally opposed the application, expanding them for the purposes of the inquiry, and also structuring it in the same way as the grounds for refusal given by West Berkshire Council, because that is almost certainly the way that the appeal will be structured. So it will enable the inspector to address our comments. So will propose that we apply for Rule 6 status. It is unclear from any of the documentation that I've seen whether that is automatic, in part because we are sharing some of we have a lot of commonality with West Berkshire Council's petitions. It's not clear if it's automatic that we get that status. So a caveat to that is if we're not granted that, we would need to make a submission directly as an interested party, and the deadline for that is the 14th of July. The substantive wording would be the same, the introduction conclusions would have to be different, but effectively the points that we'd be making in this document would be the same wording. And so that's one thing that the clerk need to do to confirm before that deadline of the 14th of July, whether we have been granted that Rule 6 status. So with that, after any questions, I'll wait for questions, if anyone from anybody.
So.
Then I'll make that proposal.
Absolutely. Let's see how much more information the council would like to tease out of you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Lister.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'd like to say thank you to Councillor Pike for preparing this document and enabling us to put in a thorough response to this. And my questions are entirely about trying to improve it or strengthen it and not On the screen there, you'll see in the paragraph 2, the second line, it says outside the setting. Well, don't worry about, and it's those words within the setting. I know elsewhere in the document you say it's not within the North Wessex Downs area, it's 1.5 kilometres away from it. It just feels like you're trying to say it's within the North Wessex Downs area, but you can't say that it's not. So you're saying it's within the setting. What does within the setting mean?
Okay.
Expert to respond.
Thank you. So within the setting, those are the exact words of one paragraph of the National Planning Policy Framework. This is you're looking at the introduction here. So when you get down to the text below, it references the paragraph in the National Planning Policy Framework, the latest version, relating to areas of outstanding national beauty. And it says that adjacent areas within the setting, quotes, are to be treated more carefully than the general area. So that is the reason for that, putting that in. And I give justifications in terms of other West Berkshire Council documents as to why it is reasonable for us to make the case that it is within the setting, because it's in the same landscape character area in the West Berkshire Council's assessment of landscape character assessments.
And if I may, I don't think it's his own words. He's actually.
Yes, so that is a
context to those words.
That's part of my question.
Those words are deliberately chosen because they are the words of the.
Thank you. I've got council on the list.
Yeah, thank you. I agree, Chair. I think I've seen those words as well used by West Berkshire Council, even in conjunction with Thatcham North East. So likewise, I'd just like to thank Councillor Pike for preparing that good and accurate reflection of the discussions. But a specific question, you mentioned you might need the clerk to make some changes depending on the outcome of the section 6 approval. What are the changes that would be required? Just clarity.
Okay. So it's the document, you've got the introduction and then we go into the substance and then there's a section of conclusions. So effectively it would be in the extent to which we can make conclusions and make proposals to the inspector, because if you're making a submission, you're effectively making a submission of evidence only. So it would be removing of the text which is relating to in the introduction calling for the. I think it's not appropriate for us to call for if we're giving evidence to call for this dismissal.
Okay,
it's only that sort of removal of the stuff that's specific to this purpose.
Thank you. And I'll trust the councillor. I will work with the clerk to clarify.
Okay, so you're comfortable with that? Councillor Richard Plummer.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. So the hearing's going to be at Bristol starting in September, last 8 days. If this rule status is applied to us, it says we have the right to attend, present your evidence and cross-examine the evidence of others. Is that what we attend? If so, who's going to do that? We brief the council? Or is Councillor Pike going to do it for us?
So firstly, that's the address of the planning inspector at the. If you go to the full documentation, you'll see that they will attempt to find a suitable premises close to the. So whether they can find a hall that is vacant for 8 working days over 2 weeks is questionable. But anyway, so it will be local. And part of this is that as part of the discussion that I would be undertaking that role, I would not be expecting to be cross-examining more than to elicit very specific information or perhaps to correct misinformation that's given to provide local insight. But I would be attending for that purpose for at least the majority of that time. There may be some issues, technical issues, which are dealt with, which don't need my attendance, but I would be available for that period to do that role. Thank you.
If I just come back and say one way is thank you for what you said. You could simply present the document you prepared, which I thought was very good, and simply say, this is our evidence of Thatcham Town Council. I'm here to answer any questions and let the opposition examine you if they want.
They will.
I think again, we must thank Councillor Pike for being able and prepared to give up a long time for that.
One further thing, just to say, that in some ways, it was very helpful that I attended the Hambridge Lake inquiry, which I was there only as an observer. The inspector was very kind that allowed us to make an intervention. But that was very useful, and I would have been very cautious about undertaking this role had I not been through, observed the process already. Thank you.
You're becoming an expert. Thank you very much. Now, we're being asked if we wish to proceed as in applying for Rule 6 status. I presume you'd like to propose that,
I would like to propose that.
Councillor.
I'd like to second.
Councillor Ellen Crumley is happy to second. Bobbed up and down just a bit. Councillor Lister. So we didn't have the P&H chair and vice chair double act. But all those in favour. Thank you very much indeed. And the clerk is wishing us to also confirm that Councillor Pike will represent the council. Proposal therefore, not Councillor Pike, somebody else, Councillor Lister.
I'd like to propose that Councillor Pike represents us.
Councillor Crumley, bobbing up and down like this. Thank you very much. Thank you. All those in favour? Even Councillor Pike's voted for himself. It's like a volunteer on the press man. Okay, item 8. We have Councillor.
So, just before the Recreation and Communities Committee last week, our Services Manager Mike Aslin spoke to legal councillor Dylan because we had just received the verbal outcome of a recent fire risk assessment at the workshop, which is on the corner of the Hills. And we've been advised, as I say, verbally, and we're still awaiting receipt of the actual report. We have been told that we have 1 month to carry out the work contained within it. So in preparation for receiving that report, which could be at any moment, Councillor Dillon recommended that we put an item on the agenda this evening seek approval for expenditure so that we are in a position to move forward. And the items that are listed here, the installation of a fire alarm system, replacement internal fire door, improvements to 2 doors, and the approval of proceedings from our Peninsula, our health and safety consultant. That's what we would need to get done swiftly. We are also expecting other matters to be raised in the report, but there will be more time to address them and they can go to the R&A committee in due course. So the council is asked to consider approving expenditure of up to £10,000 with reports obviously then coming before council committee. And council might also wish to appoint councillors that our services manager would liaise with, as we do have the fire risk assessment.
Before I take the comments, what we are saying here is we're putting aside an amount of £10,000, which we would not expect it to exceed, and without losing the quality of the repairs we need, the remediation we need, we try to not spend as much as that in any event. And the clerk is well aware of that, and I'm sure the services manager is. But equally, said to the clerk, and I know the leader of council and Councillor Cole are looking at this, we need a schedule of when we're going to do these assessments. And if we know one's coming up, we can maybe anticipate putting something in the budget which might anticipate some of this, rather than it coming out in the first quarter of the year as something we hadn't allowed for the budget, notwithstanding we have the reserves. So a few little lessons to be learned, I think, in process. But what we're being asked to do tonight is provide the ability for the clerk, the service manager, in liaison with, in discussion with the leader of council, to get on and do that work, because there is a deadline. And we cannot go through a process of just bringing it to R&A after quotes are received. We have to be a bit more expedient than that. Any questions on that? Councillor Richard Crowley.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. So item 8 is saying that written report is awaited. Doesn't say exactly from whom. It says there's a fire risk assessment. Everything's being said as if there's somebody out there government appointed or whatever is telling us that certain works need or must be done. Nothing in writing yet. Well, first of all, I would want to see it in writing, and I'd like to know the body and where they get their authority from to tell us that we've got to spend 10,000 quid of taxpayers' money.
I hear you loud and clear, and I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask the clerk to circulate that report when it arrives. And our difficulty is, in it arriving, we have 30 days to do the remediation. And unless we were to call, I've got you, Councillor Foster, a special meeting, we would like to at least be able to allocate the money to address the report. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm right in saying in the place I read that within 30 days, we have to take action. I don't think it says we have to complete the work. I think so long as we've started train the process to get there, that to me is taking action. Notwithstanding the fact that it's to do with fire and therefore it's something that needs to be got on with as quickly as possible. I didn't read that it has to be completed, so I just question that.
I'll take your train of thought. I'll add a little to it, in as much as getting the work done, not only quoted, but actually done in 30 days would be a good trick.
Yeah.
At this time. So I'm curious to know what we could do that satisfies the sort of anxiety of the report.
Thank you. So I assume that this is a survey which has been commissioned by the council, as we I'm not sure if it's statutory, but it's effectively very important practice that we do so. And therefore the results of it are effectively strong advice to the council, not a statutory obligation as such, but not actioning it would be have a serious consequences should there be a fire, because we would then likely be not insured. So I think the insurance would expect us to take such as urgent action as is feasible. And therefore, while there might be some ambiguity in the wording, I think that relying on a future cycle of meetings to address this is unwise, because we could find ourselves in the unfortunate event that there was a fire, that we were not insured. So while we don't know the exact meaning of the 30 days and exactly what we need to action, I think it is prudent to take this decision at this meeting so that when we receive the report, that speed can be addressed. Thank you.
I think that's very helpful. I think we're all around this table understanding that the works are very unlikely to be completed in 30 days, but we may have let the contract so to do. We'll be able to actually turn around to insurance companies and say, we were remedying this with proper speed. The key for us tonight is to allow the clerk and the services manager to get those quotes. If those quotes are satisfactory and associated consultation with the leader, to crack on and let the contract, the work to be done. That is what we're being asked to do tonight. And have I got a proposal so to do? Councillor Pike, I think I've got Councillor Pike. Councillor Lister is a seconder. Therefore, I'm going to ask for you to agree that, and hope you're clear on what action we're taking. All those in favour. Thank you very much indeed. I don't feel we must do that tonight, Madam Clerk. I think I'd like to see the chairman of FMGP in discussion with you and Mr. Tickle make that decision. I don't think that will hold up anything. Thank you. Appointment of internal auditor. Mr. Rose was here this evening. Personally, I think it would have been helpful if he'd had his documentation to hand. He did flounder a bit when I asked him about the negative comments. That's maybe a lesson for him to learn in future years, but you're recommending that we reappoint him. You therefore, if I ask you to introduce this, are telling us that you're pleased with the approach he takes. Do you want to add to that?
Yes, Kevin has done the last 3 financial years internal audit for us, because each time they pick different items to take a sort of snapshot of. it's always prudent to have the same internal auditor, as long as you're happy with them, obviously, to do quite a period of time, so that they get to do a broad range of the activities that we're involved in. I have had no issues whatsoever during the last 3 years. I am very satisfied with the quality of the work that he provides for us, so I'm more than happy to recommend him on a further 3-year agreement.
The 3-year agreement, continuing the services of Mr. Rose. Do I have any questions, or Councillor Richard Crowley?
Yes, again, I think I complained about this a year ago when we had a similar report, but I'm afraid for somebody of really too small, both up there and the bigger printed version, if at all possible, to assist me. So I don't know if anybody else feels the same. It seemed to me that sometimes even the presenter himself was having a bit of difficulty in getting the print.
Do we have the ability to print A3? I think that may be helpful for all of us.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Richard Crumley, A3, a little bit of extra cost on the paper, but worth it. Happy?
To me, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Pike, want to come in?
Yeah, I think I can say that I note that the fee here is less than the fee of the external auditor.
Yes.
I suspect that probably does more work than the external auditor. And given the price that accountants pay for charge for all sorts of things, it seems like he did a considerable amount of work for what he charges. Thank you.
I think that sounds like you are in favour. Councillor,
It is a question really for you to the clerk. So, Adam Clark, you mentioned, and I understand there's a balance to replace the auditor too frequently, but equally you don't want them to be there forevermore. But what do you think is the appropriate length of service of the auditor? So another 3 years would take us up to 6. Is that my understanding reasonable? Or should we seek a 2-year extension, for example?
I would say a 2-year term of 3 years, so we would go out then, sorry, yes, 2 term, and we go out next time round and seek other quotations.
yes, and can you remind us how long David Weller did it? Probably a similar amount. But 6 years sounds,
20 years.
sensible. Councillor Pike?
I'm just going to note that, of course, the internal auditor is audited by the external auditor in effect. So we have an additional safety measure compared to company accounts. Thank you.
Okay, well, we might be over egging this now. I think we're comfortable, but I need a proposer. Mr. You're happy to propose the recommendation?
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, other way round, well done. And thank you very much indeed. We've then got outside body appointments. So here, Councillor Bullfield wants to get involved with plastic-free Thatcham, West Berkshire, sustainable communities. Has anybody else expressed an interest? They're queuing up for this one, Councillor.
Yeah, I'm not too.
Fighting for it.
I think
I've blocked their
we're
emails.
clear run on that one. Okay. And so we're confirming these outside body appointments. Councillor Field for plastic-free Thatcham, West Berkshire, sustainable communities. And volunteer centre, is that a good sell, Councillor? It has been looking backwards. Can we tempt you into another year?
Mr. Mayor, I would be reluctant to feel anybody on this council felt that they could not take this on just because I wanted to hog it to myself. However, if nobody else is volunteering, then I certainly would do it.
That was a roundabout way of saying if anybody else wants to, I'll be very happy.
See you in the car.
But I don't see them raising their hand, Councillor Jeffrey, so I'm going to say to the council that Councillor Field would do the first one, Councillor Jeffrey would do the volunteer centre. Do I have a proposal?
Propose, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Not Councillor Jeffrey proposing this, I noticed. Councillor Foster seconding. All those in favour, we'll see if he votes for himself now. Yes. Well done. Thank you very much. Now, before I let you go, I've spoken to the clerk about this. She's allowed me to take chairman's privilege to thank the staff and all the councillors involved. What was a splendid day yesterday. The Monday was beyond expectations. I've already seen a short write-up on the Newbury Today website. So thank you for that, Henna. And I've been quoted saying best one we've ever done. I've not been to all of them, so I could stand corrected, but I thought it was pretty spectacular. And I think a vote of thanks to the staff. And with that, thank you very much.